Chag Sameach. Impending Chag Sameach, as the sun begins to set, we are going to light some candles, raise a glass and make Kiddush, and then Rabbi Stephen is going to do a little intro to what we are going to do here. I think you know, because you're here, something brought you here tonight, or someone brought you here tonight, and I'm glad you are here. Let's take a moment to just appreciate that we are here. Because that's not a given, you know, for every person in the room, that we are here and that we are here this year. So, as we light candles, we'll say the blessing, Lahadlik Ner Shel Yom Tov, and then we'll sing a Shehechianu. All right? So, we'll light these two candles here. Is there anybody for whom it would be very meaningful to light candles? You want to light candles? Anyone? No? Okay. Yeah? Okay. All right. Whenever we light candles in our house on Friday night, I always ask my family, all right, who do we want to send love and light to tonight? So take a moment and think about who you want to send love and light to. And in particular right now, I was in touch with one of my colleagues in Boulder, a rabbi I went to school with who has 6 congregants in the hospital after this run where Jews were attacked on a run, basically. I don't know if you heard about this, but like the most recent thing. And so my heart is with them, and I'm holding a lot of gratitude and the bittersweetness of like being a Jew in this moment in the world, and being in the world in this moment, whoever one might be. So let's take a moment and send love and light to all of the people and places we know need it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Yom Tov. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'hegianu lazman hazeh. We sing amen. Amen. people to raise a glass and stand if you would like to join me. Sorry, I don't have words for everyone here. Join me for whatever you might know of this blessing. Special holiday tune, a little bit different from our regular Friday night Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. You can say Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am v'rom amanu mikol lashon v'kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu be'ahava moadim l'simcha Chagim uzmanim l'sasom et yom Chag HaShavuot hazeh Zman matan Toratenu. We just gave thanks for all of these amazing holidays, including Shavuot, the time of the giving of our Torah. Mikra Kodesh Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim Kivanu V'charta V'otanu Kidashta Mikol Amim V'modei Kodshecha B'simcha U'v'sason Hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh Yisrael V'hazmanim L'chaim. Clink somebody nearby. L'chaim. All right, Rabbi Stephen.
So hi, folks. Chag Sameach. I'm just so excited to be here with all of you in this space. I feel like this was an idea we had a few years ago. And we're like, what if we did our own thing for Shavuot? And brought each other together as a community and helped just bring in, usher in this holiday as the sun begins to set, as Shavuot begins. I just want to first give a big shout out to all of our staff who has helped set up this space. We have V on the camera and Chris on sound. We have Jordan and Ian who've been helping run around and make sure the space is lovely and set up and welcoming, and there's plenty of food still in the other room, right? This is a kind of Jewish rules kind of gathering. So if you need to get up and find more refreshment, more food, it is over there. Please do that because we're here for a little while to share some stories. So Shavuot, as Rabbi Lizzie said, is Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of the Torah, right? We celebrated Passover just a few weeks ago, really a month and a half, 2 months, month and 3 quarters ago.
50 days.
Thank you. That is one way to determine it, but we were in Passover. We celebrated the Exodus from Egypt, this redemptive moment of the Jewish people. We counted the Omer, which was 49 days, making today the 50th day, to arrive on this spiritual journey at the foot of Mount Sinai, where we're told, right, the Israelites became not only a people, but a people with an identity, a purpose, and a mission. And this image that we're given is that all Jewish people were standing at their moment with their loved ones, including our Jewish adjacent folks, but not only those who were alive at the time, but also every Jew who would ever be in the history of our people, including those who were born into Judaism, those who chose Judaism. This is a holiday in which we lift up all who have chosen to embrace this tradition in whatever way they have. And the rabbis say, well, this is amazing because you had all of these people who were standing, right, around this mountain, and some were close and some were far away and some were tall and some were short and some couldn't see and some couldn't hear and some carried heartbreak and some carried joy. Some were young, some were old, right? Some were wise, some were just beginning to learn. And so therefore, every single person experiences revelation in a different way, in a way that is completely unique to them, which means that A, none of us have the whole picture, which I think is a good humbling moment, especially at this moment when many people claim to know it all. And also something that necessitates us coming together to celebrate revelation, because really only in community, only in learning together do we actually have a more complete picture of what this greater truth might be. And so we thought, what a way to celebrate Shavuot than to invite some folks to share their own Torah, their own stories. So I'm really excited for our speakers tonight. You know who you are. We're going to clap each of them up one at a time to share a story about the school of hard knocks. Right? When revelation came perhaps at the end of a long period of wandering, just like our ancestors did. Or as Rav Yoda says, right, failure, the greatest teacher is. It's in the Talmud, look it up. But moments things didn't go as planned, or when plans needed to change, or when you just had to throw plans out the window entirely and start all over again. These are stories that touch on these themes in really different ways. They are personal, they are deep. I've had the privilege of seeing a lot of them. They are absolutely beautiful, and I'm excited for all of you to receive this Torah tonight. So we're gonna practice something first though, right? Because it takes, I was talking to somebody the other day and I realized that I was born lacking the gene of like public speaking is like a scary thing, but I recognize it's a scary thing for some people. It's a big thing to get up and share of yourself in front of a crowd, even a friendly crowd like you. So we're gonna practice welcoming people up to this podium here. All right, so if I say next up is, let's say, Rabbi Lizzie, you're all gonna go. And if Rabbi Lizzie finishes speaking, says thank you, Chag Sameach, and is gonna go sit back down, you're going to? Amazing, you did great, you did great. This is, I'm glad that when I tell people that Mishkan is a welcoming and enthusiastic community, it really translates into the real time, real space that we're in right now. So without further ado, I want to invite up our first speaker, Linda Hassikon, who's gonna come on up. She is a card-carrying feminist, Jewish mother to davening team member Jenna, and Diet Coke addict. And she's going to take us away on our first story tonight.
So, I was, what?
Oh, yes.
Speak like right into the mic.
Okay,
We're live streaming. We want to make sure you can be heard.
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe a little, yeah. I was like,
Wait, hang on. We're gonna fix this.
that's better. Like, I can't see anyone's face, it's the microphone. I was supposed to marry a lawyer. That's what I thought anyway. I was a political science major. I cared about current events and liked to talk about social issues. I was never on the debate team, but I was on speech team and that was pretty close. I thought sharing my life with a lawyer would be interesting. We'd have friends who were interesting too. Our dinner table would be full of witty political banter. We'd go to the symphony and read the New York Times on Sunday mornings, and I'd have some kind of career and then stay home to raise kids. And people said a lawyer might feel less threatened by dating a girl who was so opinionated. People said a lawyer might be able to handle someone like me better. There were rules for girls, and I failed to follow many of them. Actually, I failed to even understand them. I understood and successfully followed the easy ones. Never beat a guy at a game, never let him know if your test scores or grades were better than his. Always ask what he thinks first. When you're on a date, pretend that you are Barbara Walters and he's the most interesting subject you've ever interviewed. I guess I thought a lawyer was most likely to ask a few questions back. But I failed to understand the depth of the unwritten rules. Put another way, I got the Torah, but not the Mishnah. If a guy asked where I wanted to go out to eat, I told him instead of turning the question around. And then I, of course, asked what he liked too, but I did not always stop myself from answering until I knew what he thought. If he asked if I was free on a Saturday night, I looked at my date book and told him, rather than pretending I had plans so he'd think he had competition. If I knew my date didn't make more money than I did, I offered to split the bill. To be fair, I did not understand that my future lawyer might find that emasculating instead. By that time, I'd gotten a couple of degrees and had gone on to a career doing public relations, lobbying, and marketing for charities. I was passionate and energetic about my work, and I figured I'd find my lawyer if I just put in the same kind of effort that I did to my career. I tried singles events and fix-ups and the personals ads, Those were the precursors to Tinder, Grindr, JDate. All the lawyers ultimately swept left. Some of them were smart, witty, and opinionated about politics. But I learned that smart, witty men who banter about politics aren't always very nice. I also learned in bits and pieces what I was doing wrong. I heard from my mom's friends and my friends' moms, and from a couple of the dates themselves, that I failed to follow the rules. The problem was that by then I wasn't sure I cared. I mean, I was deeply embarrassed, don't get me wrong, to be in my mid-20s and single. Most of my friends got married at 22. But I was also tired. It was too hard to actually listen and get to know someone if I was always trying to consider what the rules were. And I worried about the consequences of a bait and switch. I mean, what would happen when the guy found out what I was really like? It was time to admit failure and go with plan B. I realized I needed to stop looking for a guy who wanted me to be the mother of his children and start looking for the one who I wanted to be the father of mine. One day, a reporter I knew through work called and asked if I'd go on a blind date with a guy she knew. She said he was funny and nice and her favorite cousin. Oh, and he might not be available Saturday nights because he was a drummer. I said, a drummer? We met on a blind date at Pita Inn. The drummer had such thick, unruly hair that I thought he was wearing a hat. But he had beautiful brown eyes and a really sweet smile. So the drummer had said he was 5'10" and a half. But by then I knew the drill and expected him to be like 5'6" in real life. When he walked in, I saw that he was exactly 5'10" and a half, and I made a joke about that. And he was confused as to why or how someone would lie about themselves on a date. Ooh, he did not understand the rules either. On that first date, the drummer and I talked for hours. At one point, he asked what I'd done over the weekend, and I panicked. I couldn't think of anything else to say except the truth, which is that I went to a friend's wedding, and he responded by asking me about the wedding. An hour later, the drummer smiled at a little girl toddling by and asked, wasn't she cute? And I looked at him like a deer in the headlights. He asked if maybe I didn't like kids, and I blurted out that I was afraid if I admitted that I did, then he'd think I was baby crazy and trying to trap him, and could he agree that if I said I liked kids, I wasn't talking about ours, and that if I talked about attending a wedding, I wasn't hinting about our own? He said, definitely. Then he asked if I could agree that if I broke up with him, I would not do it in public on his birthday like one girlfriend did to him. And he told me about his last blind date, who said that at this point in her life, the only reason to get married was for power or money, and on their first date wanted to know how much money he made. I told him I didn't care how much money he made. There's more, but suffice it to say that we both wore our hearts and our wounds on our sleeves, and we both failed to follow a lot of rules that night and in the 38 years since. I did fail to marry a lawyer and become a stay-at-home mom. Instead, I became the primary bread earner and a working mom. Sometimes gender bending was hard. Sometimes it still is. But I learned that sometimes when you just can't follow the rules, it's because it's time to write a new rule book of your own.
Give it up for Linda. And for anybody who hasn't already turned their way and seen the drummer with the unruly hair, her husband Joel, he's sitting right here, and we're so glad you are. All right, so a couple of you have filled out some of these little slips of paper here. A lesson that I've learned from failure, said Judy, people, myself, my children, and my relationships are more resilient than I know. A lesson I've learned from failure is I can survive, my worth has not changed, and actually, redirection to a career I appreciated more. Most of these are, in fact, anonymous. A lesson I've learned from failure is usually I'm not failing as much as I think I am. All right. For our second story tonight, I want to invite up somebody who joined our community with his entire self, jumped in with both feet, literally into Lake Michigan, and also this community over the past year. And you can see him all over the place. And here at Mishkan, Mike, come to the mic, Mark Wickman. Yeah. Is it all right?
Yeah.
You were second in the lineup. I know you just got here.
Totally fine.
You're good.
Totally fine. Okay. Cool.
Right in your mouth. I'm the mic voice. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Nope. It's all good. Hey, everyone. Okay, so I have probably had like 5 or 6 different versions of what I was going to say tonight. But I'm going to kind of just go with the spirit that moves me. I have notes, I have PDFs, I have my whole life in this tablet. But as we all know, life doesn't work out because, you know, Google promises that your documents, your life is going to be available offline. She's not always available offline, right? So I wanted to kind of talk about my journey, my Jewish journey. It is very interesting. It has a lot of ups and downs. What you see is absolutely what you don't get. I learned at a very young age to perform, and to perform for an audience, for a crowd, to show up for what people wanted, right, or what they expected. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. And by the way, my thought process, I deal with OCD and ADD and depression, addiction, bouts of alcoholism. So I jump around a lot. It's hard for me to stay focused. It's not because I don't care or not because I'm not present. It's because I'm processing everything. I have been in so many different roles in my life. I've been head of sales for a global corporation. I think the largest team I had was about 1,500 direct reports. I come from nothing but everything. The youngest of 5 kids, grew up in Kansas City to a very devout Catholic family. I trudged along. The youngest sibling to me, or the closest sibling, is 3 years older than me. That guy hated me growing up. I was like his mini-me, Kevin. And I would follow him around, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, my brother wants to go here, I'm gonna go there, and like this, right? And it didn't always serve my best interest, right? Because what he aspired to be wasn't what I actually aspired to be. And I jumped around in schools a lot. Not by choice, but my parents' choice. There weren't enough boys in my 3rd grade class, so we had to move schools. We had to move me to another school. And then my brother wanted to go to Catholic school, so I had to go to Catholic school. And then I had to choose between public school and Catholic school. Then I had to choose between a legacy university and the university that I wanted to go to, right? I'm sure you can probably guess that those choices were already made for me. It wasn't until about 18 where I finally gave in and just said, to heck with it. Like, I'm my own person. This is not what I want to do. So I left. I enrolled in beauty school and was hired by one of the top 20 salons in the nation 6 months before graduation. I was flying high. I was even decided to move to New York. So I booked a one-way ticket, 2 suitcases, no place to live, no friends, no job. I had a semi-boyfriend coming with me, really just to pay half the bills because I was still just turned 21 trying to explore who I was, right? And I hit the ground running. And I was like, hey there, world, it's me. I've arrived. And I climbed the corporate ladders and was a yes man. And then the recession kind of hit. And so I had to go back home to Kansas City, tail between my legs. And that was humbling, to say the least. And there I crashed and burned. Always find myself on the wrong side of the conversation or situation. And that led me to really go to some dark places. I found myself just trying to fit in, trying to be who everyone thought I was supposed to be. And I just finally, I think I just turned, I do know, I turned 41 last week. And, right. And when I had said to Rabbi Stephen and Rabbi Lizzie, I was like, hey, listen, I'm not the greatest writer. I love speaking to people. I love telling my story. That's how I connect to people. And one of the greatest lessons that I've learned is no one knows what they're doing in life. No one. This was my 41-year-old revelation out of the desert of believing that you and you and you have it all together, right? You have the perfect outfit, you have the perfect hair, and it's man, I don't want to do that anymore. And the past couple months, I've been going to therapy and talking about truly what's going through my mind, and my love and relationship with Judaism continuously evolves and changes, and the two things that have really kind of brought me out. Sorry, if I'm over time, just cut me off. Just because I can go on for hours. But I want to just read two passages that really kind of opened my eyes at how I look at myself, how I treat the relationships that I'm in, how I approach conversations, and how to recently to learn to sit with something and not react. Because I am the quickest one to text, email, boom, boom, boom. Now I just need to relax and calm down. So these are just two things that really kind of helped me bring it all together. So one is called the top-down, ground-up effect. And so entering within, there are two paths of healing before you, from the top down or from the ground up. Working top down, you see nothing but good. You do nothing but kindness, and you spread wisdom and light everywhere. The divine, whose lost sparks are drawn to you as a magnet, leaping into the fire of their own accord, are consumed in totality. All is transformed. But it does not last. The spark stands only to the light of your fire. As soon as it begins to fade, they fall back to their places. The darkness returns, perhaps yet more powerful, due to the nurture you have provided it. Working from the ground up, you enter within the world that holds those sparks in captivity and become part of it. You do not ignore the beast within you. You recognize it. Speak with it, coaxing it to look up to the heavens and discover that is not the sum total of all that is. You do not ignore the world around you. You deal with it head on its own terms, only that all your deeds are for the sake of heaven. And in all your ways you know him, meaning they are your ways, the ways of a created being. Yet in them you know him, the creator of being. This transformation is real and lasting. It comes from within and through hard labor. And 2025 is my year of hard labor and leaning into my journey, whether it be uncomfortable, messy, authentic, and honest. It's my story. And with that, I'll leave it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Hey, Lizzie, can I have the paper? Great. I'm going to read a few of the slips of paper that were put in the basket. a lesson I've learned from failure is cars can be fixed, usually. A lesson that I've learned from failure is there can always be a plan B, C, D, etc. A lesson I've learned from failure is it's really common, so get over it quickly, so that you can iterate through every possible combination of failure until the only option left is success. So I am happy to invite up Yonatan. Where'd you go? Right there, right in front of me. Originally from Mountain View, California, and now living in Irving Park, just right around the corner. Yonatan moved to Chicago in 2022 after realizing that since no place would have better weather than the Bay Area, a place with terrible winters didn't seem so bad after all. He joined Mishkan after meeting Rabbi Lizzie at Ritual Coffee, just right over there on Rosh Hashanah 3 years ago. Please welcome Yonatan.
Yes. And I also first discovered Mishkan by doing a deep research called typing synagogue into Google Maps. All right. Like many Jews, I've had a quote from this book, the Pirkei Avot, Sayings of the Fathers, or as a friend of mine likes to say, daddy issues. And that quote drilled into my head through that one Rick Recht song, and some Jewish education after that. But it's the Imanini li mili. If I am for myself alone, or if I'm not for me, who will be? If I'm for myself alone, what am I? If not now, when will I be? So when I started college, I didn't have a real plan for what I was going to do with my life. I had grown tired of the person I had become. I no longer wanted to be the boy that had been bullied consistently throughout school and had withdrawn into himself so much over his teenage years. So I started the process of becoming a new person. Thanks to my experiences in high school marching band, I knew that it was important to foster a welcoming community, to lift up those who need help, and provide space for those who don't know that they have the ability to thrive. On May 2002, I was walking on the campus of Foothill College and noticed that there was a speaker holding forth in the central square. What he said derailed any of the plans that I had started to formulate. The speaker was an imam from Oakland named Amir Abdul Malik, and he said, if we had all the guns and tanks that the Israelis had, we'd kick all the Jews back to Germany. I was shocked to hear this on my campus, and a few days later, I managed to join a small group of Jewish students, community members, faculty, to speak with the administration. I hadn't had any interaction with any of these people before this. I barely did anything Jewishly outside of High Holy Days and Pesach, but I was there. And all I wanted from the administrator was just a NPR perspective disclaimer, the views expressed are those of the speaker and not those of the college. That's all I wanted. Refused to give it to us. And I didn't want to see this happen on campus again. So I took action. I started a Jewish Student Union at Foothill College, and for the rest of the school year was tabling on campus a ton and got involved in the Student Club Council that approved all the events so that I wouldn't approve this event in the future. In addition, I got involved in the local Hillel and the local community. But as I started to pour my heart and soul into finding a good place on campus for our people, it started to eat my life and my sanity. I backed out of a planned semester abroad program to ensure that the group didn't fail immediately, and planned more and more events. During the winter quarter, Foothill College upgraded its Heritage Month programs by making January Jewish Heritage Month. Um, but the JSU had completely taken over my life. I ended up dropping out of every class that I was taking. I wasn't spending time with my friends. I was consistently late to work, and I obviously wasn't spending time in class. So there's another important quote from Pirkei Avot. It is at the very end of chapter 2. It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. We often focus on that second part, but the first part is also very important. It is not your duty to finish the work. It is not on you to do everything. So I decided to stop. I stepped back from the JSU and focused on school. And you know what? The JSU survived. No matter how much I'd been worried about how things would continue without me, they did. JSU is still a presence on campus, and this year we saw the 22nd annual Jewish Heritage Month. And the olive tree we planted on campus survived for at least a decade before construction forced it to get moved. But for the rest of college, I continued to be involved in the Jewish community events at Foothill and at UC Irvine. Sounds out. I laughed, I danced, I sang, I worked on creating a welcoming environment for everyone. And after college, I decided to fulfill a new dream that I had, being Josh Lyman. So I moved to Washington, D.C. with 2 suitcases and a dream, and tried to make a new life out there. I was young and looking for adventure. Sadly, I tried to do it all by myself. I had forgotten some of the lessons. I was only taking short-term jobs, hoping for that permanent position that never arrived. I went out into the field as a field organizer for the DFL and discovered that I was terrible at that job. I was tired, I was depressed. Only thing I had for me was my Jewish community. There was a large weekly Torah study event that I absolutely adored and spent much of my social life around other Jews. One particularly hard day, I remember having a just complete breakdown on the bus that I was able to pull myself together just in time for Torah study and ended up having a great time. But it was too much. And after 4 years in DC, I realized it wasn't working. I was depressed, I was fat, I was unemployed. So decided to come back home. The month before I decided to move back, an old friend of mine from the Foothill College days had started posting frequently about a new fun young adult group that she had just started. And all the events sounded amazing, but I was in DC, I was never coming back, so I hid her. And when I decided to move back home, like a month later, I was like, okay, how to unhide someone on Facebook? And the day after I returned, I went to one of their monthly dinners and found my people. And as I rebuilt my life, my sanity, I had Jews next door. We had friends, community, and we found ourselves. We also provided a good chunk of Jewish social life in the South Bay. I quickly joined the leadership and was planning 4 events a month: a Shabbat meal, a sit-down dinner at a restaurant, and Torah studies, and hikes, and tours, et cetera, et cetera. But I did my work to make it a welcoming place. But sadly, we faced an issue that many volunteer groups face, and why I'm so glad that Mishkan has event people who plan things. What do you do when people burn out, when they move away? What do you do in situations like mine when you finally find a job in a field that you're good at and can't spend 6 hours a week doing event planning? And if I had been a few years younger, I would have run myself into the ground again. But I had learned. So as things were starting to get too much, I stepped away. Passed leadership off to one of my friends and let the group be. Unlike last time, this group didn't survive the years, but that's okay. Not every group, not every community, not every situation is built for the long haul. Some are perfect for one moment in time, and then something new takes place. And we're in very stressful times right now, for reasons many and varied. And I think it's important to remember the flip of the second Gulter and Pirkei Avot. You are not at liberty to neglect the work, but it's not your duty to finish it. And I end with another couple of quotes that my old synagogue, as part of their Shabbat service, has another quote from there to paraphrase. In a place where there is no mensch, be a mensch. And then to quote from my favorite author, never be cruel, never be cowardly. Remember, hate is always foolish, and love is always wise. Always try to be nice, and never fail to be kind. That includes to yourself. Thank you.
One of the beautiful things about hearing individuals tell stories is that, I don't know if you caught, Zman Matan Toratenu, the giving of our Torah, which you could understand, like we say that as part of the Kiddush on Shavuot, Zman Matan Toratenu. It's like the bumper sticker for the day, the giving of our Torah, which could be a collective thing, but it could also be an individual thing. And so as each person kind of shares the Torah that they needed to learn and maybe need to learn again and again, I encourage everyone to, notice, as it's funny, as we hear the snaps of things, you can sort of hear what's resonating for one person or another as somebody else speaks, but what your Torah is that you need to internalize this year. A lesson I've learned from failure is that it is not a destination, but a stop on the road. A lesson I've learned from failure is that it hasn't killed me yet. A lesson I've learned from failure is that it's okay to fail. Our next speaker, born in Chicago, raised on the North Shore, and moved back to Chicago after spending a year in Peru, honored to have made many meaningful, you wrote collections, but I'm thinking you meant connections, with people who call this wonderful place home. Please welcome Eliza Becker to the floor. And for anybody that has not gotten food, please go next door, get something to drink, get something to eat. You will not be rude, seriously. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. You know what? I don't want it to get messed up with my stuff. I'll just put it here. Okay. Letting go 30 years on. After my dear friends Ralph and Dan died, I couldn't face my overwhelming grief. I tried to run away from it, but I couldn't escape. It took me more than 30 years to be able to reconcile with what had happened. I tracked down a few mutual friends of ours who were still alive and asked them to share their memories of that time. I listened to podcasts and read history to get context about what I had lived through, and I sobbed for countless hours about the injustice of it all. I first met Ralph in 1982 when I observed his ESL class at Universidad Popular in Lakeview. I couldn't help but notice that he was a strikingly handsome man and impeccably groomed. But what most impressed me was how he actively engaged his adult immigrant students who must have been exhausted after a long day of work. I was so taken by Ralph's teaching that I asked if I could watch another class he taught at Truman College for adult refugees who had been farmers, fishers, and soldiers in Southeast Asia. When I walked into his classroom, the students were focused on constructing sentences using instructional posters that Ralph had created and drawn original pictures on. Most had never learned to read or write their native language, so it was no small feat that Ralph had succeeded in teaching them English literacy. That day, Ralph and I struck up a friendship, that lasted to the end. Ralph shared an apartment with his partner Dan. Daniel, as Ralph would call him, Danny, as he became known when he was an activist, and Dan, which is what he introduced me with. Dan was an underemployed artist and actor and an exotic parrot collector. The two of them were consummate entertainers, and their parties were among the highlights of my young adult life. We had all-day picnics at the beach during summer and themed parties during the winter. I particularly remember when they had a wedding for their cats. A few years later, Ralph accepted a job teaching English in Kuwait. Dan and Ralph broke up but remained close and committed. When he returned from overseas, Ralph and I discussed the possibility of becoming roommates. When I told my mother about it, she asked if Ralph had taken an HIV test. I assumed my mother was just being overly protective when she said it could be risky. So when Ralph told me that he and Dan had both tested positive, I was taken aback. It was hard to believe that my friends had contracted this gruesome disease that was generally a premature death sentence at that time. From that moment forward, I found myself thrust into a world of dying young men. Dan did not want to die. He was enraged that his life was treated as expendable. He threw himself into activism, becoming the primary face of the AIDS protest movement in Chicago. He also became the first nationally syndicated political cartoonist in the gay press. For whatever reason, Ralph seemed to be at peace with his fate. He focused much of his energy in developing a program for foreign-born teaching assistants at UIC. Personally, I struggled with the idea that Ralph and Dan were likely to die before their time and wished against the impossible that some miracle would keep them alive. It was heart-wrenching to watch Ralph's rapid decline as he experienced one opportunistic infection after another. I have vivid memories of the large visitor room in the AIDS ward at Illinois Masonic Hospital, where Ralph and Dan went repeatedly for treatment. It was not only a place for visitors, but for patients to interact with each other during their frequent hospitalizations. Some of the young men looked ghostly. They were thin, balding prematurely, and had lesions from Kaposi sarcoma. Some, like Dan, appeared healthy on the outside, but were not. They would recover from one infection and then be back when they got sick from another one. Eventually, Ralph's brilliant mind became dulled by brain lesions. He lost his vision and his ability to speak. His once muscular physique was emaciated. On Ralph's final night, some friends and I sang to him, hoping we could be comforting, as he lay listless in his hospice bed, and he could still hear. The next day, as Ralph lay gasping, Dan gave him morphine to ease his breathing. Within an hour, Ralph Noble Hosmer was dead. It was December 17th, 1990, and Ralph was 34 years old. At Ralph's funeral, Dan gave a eulogy that imagined a time in the not-too-distant future when AIDS would no longer be fatal. They were a lost generation, he said, lost to neglect. The cover of Ralph's funeral program had a quotation from Helen Keller. "What we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we deeply love becomes a part of us." Daniel Sotomayor's relentless fight kept him alive an additional 14 months. He died on February 5th, 1992, 10 years after I first met Ralph. He was 33, as was I. The cover of Dan's funeral program had a quote from him that encapsulated his final years. "You have to do what you can and don't give up, because someday there are going to be survivors." Life-saving drugs were introduced in 1996, just 4 years after Dan died, and 15 years after the AIDS virus had been identified, making the once fatal disease largely manageable. Widespread homophobia had allowed the government to ignore the crisis until it couldn't be, because of activists like Dan. Sadly, the struggle against government neglect continues today with the defunding of HIV prevention drugs in low-income countries. Toward the end of Dan's funeral service, someone sang a beautiful rendition of the Irish song, Danny Boy. The tenderness of the song reminded me of Dan in quieter moments and helped me to imagine him finally at rest. Nearly all of the men in Dan and Ralph's social network died within those few short years. I was overwhelmed by the immensity of loss. After Dan died, I wanted to flee the horror and not feel it. As I reflected back, I realized that I didn't actually fail when I suppressed my grief. My friends died at the peak of the AIDS crisis in the United States. There was a huge shortage of resources for the victims, let alone the mourners. We all did the best that we could, given the circumstances, and deserve neither blame nor condemnation for whatever we did or didn't do. At a time when so many had distanced themselves from the sick, we stayed connected. This eulogy is my best effort to fully grieve the loss of my friends and the traumatic times we lived in. As Rebecca Salnit writes, "The art is not one of forgetting, but of letting go. And when everything else is gone, you can be rich in loss." Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. A lesson that I have learned from failure is that I am not the failure. A lesson that I've learned from failure is to keep running for the finish line after you fall off the runners of the dog sled. I now want to know if that's literal or figurative. It's literal. Okay, it's literal. I have so many questions now. A lesson that I've learned from failure is many things can be fixed, and if you act in accordance with your values, you'll find a way. So next up, we have, weighing in at approximately 8 tons of joy. I have questions about that too. Mishkan audience, we present to you the kid from New Jersey, Richard Kalis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Kalis, and do me a favor, please clap or snap if any of the next few sentences resonate with you in any way. I am a proud alumnus of a Jewish summer camp. I absolutely loved Color War with all of my heart. One no. I spent every summer at camp, either as a camper or counselor, through most of college. I got fired from summer camp for smoking pot. No? Oh, just me? No one else? Okay. So, all right, let's rewind a little bit. Do you mind if I take this out? I went to a summer camp in Burbank, New York, which is right outside Poughkeepsie. And for those of you who don't know Burbank, the most fun thing to do there is to go to the local diner. But I loved this camp. I grew up there. I'm still in touch with some of my old counselors. I'm in touch with most of my friends there. The director loved me as a camper, and when I became a counselor, she set me up for success by having a great unit head and putting me with kids who fit with my personality. I was lucky in that the Israeli counselors who came in for the summer wanted to work with me, be in my Edah, which is our age group, because I knew everything about the camp, backwards and forwards. The kids loved me, the staff loved me. I was a rock star, and nothing could take me down. Nothing. Now, was my head bigger than the line for cotton candy at the camp fair? Yes, 100%. I thought I was untouchable. I could do anything I wanted because I was liked, because I was adored, and I was good at my job. And because of that, I earned the right to break my contract. 3 to 4 nights a week, I would meet with my friends, Jared and Avi, and we'd light a joint and talk about the kids we were in charge of. We would talk about the girls we liked and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The kids were asleep, so there's really nothing wrong with what we were doing. But the worst part, in my opinion, was the lying. I don't think smoking pot is inherently bad. I don't even think sneaking out is inherently bad. But I told the director, I told these parents, and I told these kids that I would be available to them throughout the day. I would be there to provide fun times throughout the summer. I would be there in case they woke up in the middle of the night because they were scared or just had trouble sleeping. And I wasn't there a lot of the time. And when I was, I may not have been in my best mental state to provide that fun, to comfort them in the middle of the night, and really just keep them safe and enjoy their time, give them the experience that I had. So one night, Avi and Jared and myself, we went to Jared's car to smoke the newest joint we had procured in Burbank, New York. And while we were smoking and laughing, Avi and I remembered we wrote a song and we were gonna go get it from our bunk. And on the way out, we ran into, we're gonna call him Kleenex. I'm just gonna not say his real name. Now, true story, Kleenex actually, years prior to this story, also got fired for smoking pot at camp. And that night, Kleenex was on his way to his home apartment because he was having issues with his girlfriend. Don't worry, they got married, it's all good. So we talked with Kleenex, we thought, he had no idea that we were stoned, and we went along our merry ways. Kleenex knew we were stoned. The next morning, I was called into the director's office, and I had to tell her that I had violated our contract that I had made with the campers and with her, and I was going to pay the consequences. I was sent home without the ability to say goodbye to my campers. That was the dagger. I was so angry. I was mad at the director. I was mad at the camp. I was mad at Kleenex. I wasn't mad at me. It wasn't my fault. I was really good at my job. I was indispensable, so someone else was wrong. No, not me. But I was a young idiot. I was wrong. It was my fault. I was too big-headed to see that people put trust in me. And they trusted me because I said I was going to follow through on a promise I made. Promises to keep kids safe first and entertain them second. So what did I do as a camp-loving kid who had just lost his favorite job? Well, funny story. Later that year, I was getting high with a different friend. And my phone starts ringing. It's a number I don't recognize. And I'm like, oh, this will be fun. Maybe I should answer it. My friend's like, you probably shouldn't. So I didn't. And then the next day, I listened to the voicemail, and it was the director who had fired me for getting high. And she was offering me a job. She wanted me to come back, but not as a counselor. She wanted me to come back as a unit head. So I was not just in charge of one bunk of children, I was in charge of a whole age group, numerous bunks, and the counselors in charge of that. Now, did they offer it to me because the people they offered it to first said no? Yes, 100%. That being said, I was excited. I honestly would have gone back to camp with any job they would have offered. They could have had me clean the bunks. I would have happily done that. And if you've seen 8th grade boys' bunks, you know how big of a sacrifice that is. And when I got there, they actually explicitly told me the reason they wanted to bring me back was because I had made that mistake last year. At first, I disagreed with them. I said, no, I'm not that. I'm that great counselor from before. It took me a while to really see what that meant, that offer of teshuvah, that second chance. I didn't see at first the experience that I had taken away from myself and from others. And they helped me, I think, become a better person because of it. I never told anyone who worked there how much I appreciated them giving me a second chance, because that summer in general was a blast. I got to produce all of Color War and let every kid there love it as much as I did. All of the new Israeli counselors wanted to have a day where the kids would visit Israel throughout the camp. And I produced that, made passports, and all the kids got to experience that. I helped a bunk of rambunctious 7th graders stop physically fighting each other and sit in circles sharing their feelings. To this day, the hardest thing I've ever done. I stopped thinking that I was the best person in the room. I stopped thinking I was the only person in the room. I started looking around and asking to learn from others and seek feedback and asking more questions than looking for praise. I learned from that senior leadership group what a second chance really was, and got a real-life example of teshuvah. And this all brings me back to one quote that my mother once told me, who now, when I tell her she told me that, she says, I'm pretty sure I never said that. But I remember her telling me this explicitly, which is, it is okay to make a mistake. What's not okay is to not try and learn from it. So thank you very much.
So good. Thank you, Richard. A lesson I've learned from failure is the sun always rises the next day. A lesson I've learned from failure is, when is a failure actually failure? A lesson I've learned from failure is nothing is permanent. There are do-overs. I feel like murder is permanent. But I'm pretty sure that's not what you meant. Sorry. Priya Parker, the expert on gathering, says you're not supposed to end on logistics. So we're closing in on our last two speakers. And so by way of just letting you know what's coming, 10 p.m. is when the thing actually starts at Anshe Emet. And so many of us will be walking from here over to Anshe Emet to continue a night of learning that we have begun here. And actually they're beginning in their own way right now over there as well in their community. But 10 p.m. is when there's the big thing in their sanctuary with a bunch of different rabbis from all the different Lakeview communities in dialogue about the 10 Commandments. That's the big theme this year and also every year for the last 2,000 years. But yeah, sometimes they try and get creative with it. What are the issues you think people should be talking about this year? And, but this is actually, it should be interesting. People in dialogue. And then for the rest of the night until 4 or 5 a.m., there will be classes that people from all of the different communities are teaching, and so, including also rabbis and cantors are teaching. And so you get there, you'll see what's on the menu, and you may decide you want to stay until 4 or 5 in the morning. They do a davening there at 4 or 5 in the morning. Are you going to do that? Yes. Amazing. Amazing. For people who might be less hardcore than the two of you, it's your Hebrew birthday, so of course you're staying up all night and learning Torah. In this room at 9 a.m., Rabbi Stephen and I will be leading also Shavuot davening, which will include Hallel, and also we will be reading and talking about the Ten Commandments and the section of the Torah that gets read on Shavuot. And so you are invited back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow. There will be cheesecake and coffee. And Yizkor on Tuesday online. All right. I think those are all the details we have to offer. And with that, I want to invite Jessica Kaz to the floor. Longtime community member. I did Great.
I'm good. I need my glasses or not. Okay, thank you. Can I say hi first? Hi, everybody. Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach. So nice to be here with everybody. And my son Asher is here visiting, so that's extra sweet. He was the inspiration for this story. Stretching over 51 years of my life, this tile and others like it in my home have been my memory keepers. They tell the story of my shifting relationship with Israel. My mom tells the story of when I was 6, she took me to the Christian quarter of the old city of Jerusalem to buy these Armenian tiles to decorate our home. It was 1972, and my parents, my 2-year-old brother and I were living in the San Simon neighborhood of Jerusalem. My family had made Aliyah, caught up in the euphoria of the Six-Day War victory. Israel was a modern-day miracle in which we were obligated to play our part. I'm still surprised that I have no memories of that visit to the Armenian potter's studio in the old city. No smells of sumac or fresh pita, no sounds of Arab men calling out to buy their watermelon. I do have fragments of memories of the tiles in the various kitchens of my childhood homes. We moved a lot. The tiles stood watch. At that age, I was endlessly curious about the smells and the tastes of our neighbors' kitchens. I already knew my mom didn't cook with those spices. Our neighbors were regal Persians, loud Moroccans, disoriented Algerians, and uptight British Jews. The ingathering of the exiles in our very own apartment building on the edge of Jerusalem in the early 1970s. A wonderland for a curious and empathic kid. In our kitchen, in that very apartment, the tiles stood silently, beautifully silent. The birds on the tile beckoning, "What's your story?" After 3 years of struggling, we packed our suitcases to leave the not-so-promised land. The tiles came with, tucked away in our suitcases, protected by layers of clothes. The promise of the miraculous modern state of Israel crashed into the realities of sleeping in bomb shelters during the Yom Kippur War. No family close by, and a very tough economy. Other beloved objects that came with us were Persian rugs, a Moroccan tea set, a small abstract painting by one of the neighbors, Farida, which I treasure. These objects told the stories of the far-flung Jews moving back to our ancestral homeland. I learned early on that it was our moral obligation to settle the land and make the desert bloom. The apartment building we left was the living proof that the miracle of the state of Israel was a just cause. Those early years in Jerusalem imprinted these lessons on my heart. My day schools, camps, camps. Thank you. Youth groups, and 12 subsequent visits and courses of study in Israel over the next 23 years reinforced that Israel was metaphorically my left arm, integral to my being. As the verse from Psalm 137, verse 5 says in Hebrew, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim eshkachech yamini. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my left hand wither. Israel was the center of all the stories that gave meaning, purpose, and direction to my life. I believed in the whole package. Israel is our ancestral home, and I am obligated to be part of this greatest experiment in Jewish history in over 2,000 years. I heard no other stories besides this one. So I moved back. This time my suitcases, going back to Jerusalem with no return ticket, held my toddler Dory's toys and clothing. While studying Talmud in the mornings, I volunteered with an organization helping women seeking divorce, but held hostage by their abusive husbands, because only a man can grant a Jewish legal divorce, a get. The religious court system she had to navigate was a second abuse. Here started the cracks in my story of, quote, the great modern state of Israel, end quote. The stories of abuse I heard from these women and the complete disregard from the rabbis were earth-shattering to me. I thought to myself for the first time, my Israel is royally fucked up. And yet, I told myself, it's my Israel. I won't give up my Judaism or my Israel to them. In those 5 years living in the neighborhood called Baka in Jerusalem, my children, Meital and Asher, were born. That's Asher. I was doing my part for door to door, generation to generation, the survival mantra I heard my whole entire life. Never mind that we were living on top of an old Arab home in a neighborhood called by its original name in Arabic, Baka. I started to be curious about the Palestinian story, the Arab story. Around that time, I went to the same Armenian pottery studio my mom took me to in 1972. And I bought my own memory keepers, the tiles. This visit, I do remember, I finally heard the story of the Armenian family, the Karkashians, their journey from Turkey to British-controlled pre-state Palestine in 1919 to work on restoring the tiles on the Dome of the Rock. I was struck by their history, by their connection to Jerusalem, and the fact that Christians dedicated 3 generations of their family to honor and beautify the Haram el-Sharif, the Muslim holy site called the Dome of the Rock. The tiles now conveyed a story of religious coexistence I had not known about as a little girl. Mid-2001, 6 months into the Second Intifada, when buses and cafes in my neighborhood of Jerusalem and all over Israel were being blown up, I left the not-so-promised land. Once again, Jerusalem tiles were packed lovingly into suitcases and brought back to America. I carried with me stories of the diversity of Israel and the deep and disturbing failures of the Great Experiment. Back in America, my kids went to the same Jewish day schools, camps, thank you, synagogues and youth groups as I did. I taught them the same lessons I learned. The miracle of the state of Israel built out of the ashes of the Holocaust. It's our right and our moral obligation to fight for it and to support at all costs. I never corrected or amended this story, even though by then I knew better. I knew that Christian and Muslim Palestinians had their own stories, history, and their own connection to the land that was fundamentally different than mine. But although I encouraged my kids to bring home their Muslim and Assyrian Christian friends for Shabbat dinner, I did not include Palestinians. I was still scared of humanizing Palestinians. How could both people's stories be true? I was so scared that my children would reject what was so dear to me. For the first time, I noticed a few cracks in some of the tiles in my kitchen in Skokie. And then the summer of 2020, I was in my kitchen in Chicago, surrounded by my tiles, listening to an interview with Sally Abed, one of the founders of the Standing Together movement in Israel. Sally is a Christian Palestinian citizen of Israel. My already fragile heart, broken to pieces by the pandemic, pervasive police brutality, and the murder of George Floyd, heard Sally being asked, "Do you condemn violence against Jews?" I heard her break down in tears and ask emotionally, "Why do Jews always ask me that? Am I not human?" Of course, Sally was human. I wondered why she felt that way. What was her story? What was her suffering? I realized that I had not really seen Palestinians as fellow human beings worthy of compassion. That was deeply painful and shameful. The cracks in the story I was raised on opened wide, my heart shattered. Where is my compassion? Where is my heart? What kind of a human and a Jew am I if I only think about my own story and my own safety? I couldn't stop crying. Crying for all those lost stories, for my lack of compassion, for being stuck in my own Jewish fear. Not only did I shut it all out for myself, I transmitted that to my children. The lesson that Palestinians are invisible. I had missed out on holding both people's stories at the same time. My tiles had never had a chance to tell their story. Today, my two Jerusalem-born kids, Meital and Asher, have tiles in their own kitchens. My youngest daughter, Gili Tamar, who is named for Jerusalem, will soon have Armenian tiles in her kitchen. My oldest daughter, Dori, lives in Israel and works to bring to the world the stories of the trauma of both Palestinians and Israelis. My tiles now hear my empathically unsettled conversations with my new Palestinian friends. Mostly, my tiles listen to a lot of sad Arabic music. My tiles are parts of me, with their cracks and with their worn edges. When I listen closely, I can hear the birds whispering, "I see your aching heart, my dear. It is a heart of many rooms. Hold both people's stories. It is the only way forward to healing and hope."
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. Before I call up our last storyteller, a few more lessons. A lesson that I've learned from failure is they're not judging you as harshly as you're judging yourself. A lesson that I've learned from failure is you can fail 1,000,000 times, but you only need to succeed once to be a success. A lesson that I've learned from failure is how to fight for myself the way I fight for others. So last but not least, I want to invite up Lori. New to the city, this brand new Mishkanite made her Chicago stage debut at this year's Purim Spiel. She told me earlier that participating in that and now this evening's Story Slam has inspired her commitment to only appear in Mishkan-sponsored theatrical events. Please welcome Lori Feldman.
So a rabbi, my mother, and a stuffed monkey enter a funeral home. No, let's just put a pin in that for a moment. Start again. Weird transition. My mother sadly passed away in 2017. She was 91 years old, and we were happy that we had a big party for her on her 90th birthday. It was a joyous evening. And now my brother Todd and I were going to be planning another far less joyful event, her funeral. But let me take you back to the night before she passed. As we sat in this Florida hospital with Mom that Friday night, my brother got a call from an acquaintance of his, someone he met at a farmer's market where my brother was playing with his band, and the acquaintance had a booth. this friend of my brother's, he was from the local Chabad, and he was giving out challah, hoping to tempt Jewish shoppers with the one thing they could not resist: baked goods. Now, my brother, who is not actively a practicing Jew, had been at the Chabad for Shabbos dinners. I suppose that his friend and his friend's father, the Chabad rabbi, figured that my brother would come around one of these days. They would find that their work was paying off, it seemed. When my brother spoke to his friend, he said that it was just a matter of time. And his Chabad friend said, well, since it was Friday night and her passing was imminent, we had to say certain prayers. What prayers? I didn't know. I had no idea, neither did my brother, but we dutifully repeated the prayer as recited to us on the phone. This was the start of lots of repeat after me's we would have in the days ahead. The next morning, Mom passed. And once we sorted out things with the hospital and the funeral home, Todd and I followed a Jewish tradition that we were more familiar with. We went to a deli to get something to eat. And on the way back to Todd's house, I employed one of my own spiritual traditions. I went to a liquor store to stock up on wine. Now, maybe it was from too much Pinot Grigio, but this is where my memory gets a little fuzzy about what happened next and when. So let's just make this as like it's a movie and cut to the funeral home. Todd and I are in a conference room with the funeral director, who is asking funeral director type questions. Graveside service? Check. Plain pine coffin? Yep. Tahrihi? Sorry? The funeral director explained to Todd and me that this is the simple white burial garment used to dress the deceased in accordance to Jewish traditions. Now, my mother was a go-to-the-beauty-parlor every week lady. She had her hair dyed red even when she was in the funeral, in the nursing home. And she always wore lipstick when she went out. She was not going out of this world wearing some schmata. I intended to head to Kohl's with the 30% off coupon I found in a pile of junk mail and buy her a new top and pants, maybe even with a monkey pattern. Well, the monkeys, later, wait. So my brother has the rabbi on the phone, and he's telling Todd, no shroud, no service, no shomer, no service. This is when I realized that I had maxed out on my brother's Chabad cosplay. Our house growing up was in a predominantly Orthodox neighborhood. And let's just say that our family, who ate bacon and drove on the Sabbath, was not beloved. My mother did not appreciate her neighbors treating us like pseudo-Jews. Oh, but that's a story for another slam. Anyway, I was pretty sure that she would find it hypocritical to follow customs she never asked us to follow. Now this is when the funeral director, a wise man who I guess saw his share of fights about ceremonies and such, offered up a suggestion. Have the ritual of preparing the body and wrapping Mom in the shroud take place, and put the Kohl's clothes on top. A Solomon-like decision, a great solution. The rabbi was happy, the brother was happy, and the daughter, I guess I was happy? I still felt like I was stuck in some game of whose funeral is it anyway? But I said a silent yes and headed off to Kohl's, coupon in hand. Okay, so the monkeys. My mother loved monkeys. She had amassed a giant collection of monkey tchotchkes, and at some point, Todd and I decided that we would put some of her favorite ones in the casket before she headed out. We did not mention this to the rabbi. I thought it would be a nice surprise. So now, cut to the funeral. For a variety of reasons, we were low on the number of family members in attendance. But whoever was doing the casting for this film was clearly a Wes Anderson fan. One by one, our quirky characters started arriving. My brother's bandmate in shorts, Hawaiian shirt, high socks, and sneakers. He was accompanied by a gal who was a combination of Charo and those poofy-lipped Botox Mar-a-Lago women with just a touch of Janine Pirro after polishing off a box of wine. They were followed by a tall man wearing gold chains and a giant cross. He looked like what you'd get if John Batiste and Mr. T had a baby. There was a lady I recognized as Mom's neighbor, but I didn't remember her name. I could only remember her husband's, Harold Hill. As any musical theater nerd understands, every time I saw him, I sang, "We Got Trouble," right here in River City. Come on, with a capital T, that stands with P, that stands for pool. All right, you get it. Thank you for joining me. I sang it, though, in my head when I saw the real Harold Hill, so he didn't freak out every time I saw him. So the cast of characters kept on coming. Who are these people? Did they know my mother? Were they at the wrong cemetery? That is when the rabbi and his son entered. And, well, I have never seen a rabbi do such a double take on the way in. I am sure that he thought he was at the wrong cemetery. And then the ceremony began. And it was lovely. The rabbi was mindful of his eclectic audience. He explained what he was saying and why. And everyone was listening really intently. They were feeling the ceremony. All these random people, and I included myself in the randomness, were feeling it. Each came up to throw dirt on the casket. And that's when the funeral director came running with something in his hand and he said, "You forgot a monkey!" It was one of the stuffed monkeys that was left out of the casket. Now, I don't remember who did this, but the errant monkey was placed on top of the casket before it was lowered into the ground. And I cried. No, not for the monkey, and not for the whole death thing, but because it was such a beautiful ceremony. I was grateful that we followed the customs that we did. I was grateful to the rabbi and his son, to Charo and her boyfriend, to the son of John Baptiste and Mr. T. I was grateful for this pop-up community who embraced our traditions. And I was thankful to my brother for his wanting, for whatever reason, to follow the Jewish rituals of death and burial. Though I will never get out of my head the rabbi's face upon seeing the monkey on top of the casket, I will also never get it out of my heart, the people who came to the funeral. And though I didn't think that I wanted to follow the Jewish rituals myself, it struck me, and a recent conversation with Rabbi Stephen reminded me. I think I do.
Can we just give a huge hand for all our storytellers tonight? Linda, Mark, Yonatan, Aliza, Richard, Jessica, and Lori. This is a really beautiful tradition we started last year. This is our second annual. Next year, we'll make it official halacha. When you do something 3 times, it becomes law. So if anybody's driving, my guess is there's plenty of street parking around on Shamet. My guess is their lot is probably full, but they'll have more food and drink over there, and we're so glad to celebrate with you and keep the learning going. Thank you for being here, everybody. What?
Okay, before people start heading, just so that you have it in your head, since we all walk at different paces, we're going to go down Ravenswood to Grace and keep going down Grace all the way down Shaman. No Jew left behind.